It's a bit, yeah, we'll see if it's false or not.
6.
All right, Mayor, we're good whenever you're ready.
Okay. All right. It is
He is
6
not here.
o'clock.
I thought I saw it.
Please rise for pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Smith,
Here.
Anderson. Here. Arcano, absent. Burbank. Here. Bergerson. Here. Bender.
Here.
Green.
Here.
Do we have, and just for those of you that don't know, Administrator Brunel will be out this evening. I think she's on Zoom, right?
She's listening, but she does not want to speak.
Okay, okay. And yeah, Kenny's out, so.
Yes.
Do we have any modifications, deletions, additions?
Want to excuse Councilmember
Yes.
Arcano?
Oh, start with that.
Move to approve Councilmember Arcano.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, Council. Okay, now modifications, deletions, additions, anything to the agenda this evening?
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? You? All right, we'll get into public comment. Tree was gonna check the roster there. Nobody signed up, but if anybody would like to speak for 3 whole minutes, we'll have another opportunity at the end of the meeting. Okay. All right, committee reports. Only thing I have off the top of my head is if you didn't know, Ed Osborne passed away last week. He was born in Enumclaw in 1937 and 86 years old. So he was a bull of the woods in 2017 and spent most of his career. He was in the Seabees in the Navy and in the timber industry his whole life. So his wife Lois, and they'll have a service at Pete's Pool. Well, now it's the Enumclaw Field House, Pete's Pool, April 13th at 1 p.m. if anybody knows him or would like to extend their condolences. And with that, we'll get into development services, transportation and utilities.
That's Councilmember Arcano's committee.
Oh.
He's not here.
Okay. And we do have notes from that. Did you want to touch on anything? Just,
I wasn't there.
okay. Oh, you weren't there that time. Okay.
I wasn't either. I was homesick.
Okay.
Oh, Chris is also here if anybody has any questions.
Okay. All right. Just for transportation, if anybody has any questions or anything. I know we have notes here from Kenny, so. Nothing, okay. Did we have any other
That's the only
committees? That was it, the only committee that met in the last round. Okay. Council member comments and go to the order. Kenzie.
March 18th, I went to the Citizens Advisory Commission and they just finally kind of came to an agreement on the park enhancement policy, naming policy, and then they are still working on the public art policy. So once they have all of those together with their notes and kind of revisions for us, they'll send it for resolutions for us to look at. So they are doing the work. I sat in, they had really good discussions, so I know what they're doing. And so they're waiting on that third one though. So it's just a lump sum for us. So it's not one after another. So I appreciate that too.
Super.
Mhm.
Thank you. Councilmember Green.
PCRC met last Thursday. I can't recall the date. It was probably the shortest PCRC meeting I can remember at 1 hour, which is lightning speed for those meetings.
Mhm.
Welcome to the club. Councilmember Burbank.
Yeah.
It was a good one. We had a small city day, so basically it was a time when small cities can come and talk about things that are impactful to them. A couple things that came up were the definition of a small city. There was some frustration around what was included in the small city and the county transportation competition package. And so we didn't come to any conclusions. There was different metrics around, like, well, maybe it's 11,000 people, maybe it's like 1% of the county population. So just some ideas are getting floated around. We'll probably explore that at a later time. I threw out there, being definitely a small city. I was like, well, if we're gonna grow the pot of small cities, we should also grow the small city set aside as a percentage of that countywide funding competition. So there's enough funds to go around. Another thing that came up was a discussion around like staffing and how to, I don't know, like work with other cities to accomplish things with a small staff. So some of the ideas were like tapping into resources with bigger cities, like maybe, I don't know, like paying Tacoma a stipend and using some of their staff for something if we're short staff, things like that. Again, like nothing concrete came out of it, just a kind of a brainstorm session. We also approved 6 projects for the regional transportation funding competition. That's different than the countywide one, which I think the applications may be out now. But that is it from the PCRC.
Okay, super. Thank you. Denise.
So I went to the last 2 Senior Citizen Advisory Commission meetings, and the one in February and then the one in March. So in February, they served a total of 591 meals, and with an average of 57 people participating per day. And there was discussion about the work that's going to be done to provide more safety at the crosswalks at Main Street and the trail, and discussion of holding a wellness fair in the fall of this year. So suggestions were made of possible vendors that would be invited. And then on March 6th, they did 590 meals with an average of 53 people per day participating. And they talked about some travel trips that are going to be available for the seniors. There's one in May, there's one in July, and there's one in September. So, that might be fun for those seniors that want to do that. There was more discussion of the wellness fair planned for September. And there was discussion on increasing the number and location of benches along the trail so that people will have more resting spots. And last thing was discussed was the need for more senior housing in Buckley.
Okay.
So.
Super. Thank you.
Mhm.
Right. Any other council member comments? Good to the order stuff? No? Okay. On to the consent agenda.
On tonight's consent agenda is an engineering services proposal for Spruce Street improvement design and approval of the city council minutes of November 14th, 2023.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Motion carries. The next item is ordinance number 06-24, adopting the 2024 Stormwater Management Program.
Move to approve ordinance number 06-24, adopting a new 2024 City of Buckley Phase 2 NPDES Stormwater Management Program.
Yeah.
Second.
Okay. Discussion, any questions, comments, concerns? Denise?
I had, and not that this was just a really interesting read, but I had some questions on some of the acronyms. I couldn't find what some of them meant. The IDDE, that was one. I don't know what that means.
ID, what was it?
Illicit
Oh.
discharge detection and elimination.
Okay,
And you keep that stuff out. Of school.
okay. Keep bad
Illicit.
stuff out. Don't go away yet. I think there's another one in here.
Not sure I can answer all these, but.
Okay.
give it my best
But-
shot.
I'm sure you know better than I. BMPs,
Best management practices.
okay.
Yeah, we-
Dawn's on here too, if you can't answer one, I think I'd be able to.
Okay,
Okay.
and then MS4,
That is basically that's what DOE calls our stormwater system as a whole.
okay,
Why it's considered a MS4, I'm not sure. this system.
Okay. Okay, so, okay,
Should be.
sounds good to me. I just couldn't find them anywhere in here, you know, how they usually spell it out. That might be all for now. Oh, just one question. As far as there's a place that says select general public as the audience and general stormwater education, they focus about pet waste bags. Is there a possibility of getting like trash cans along too? Only because when you walk the trail, you see a lot of people have used
Yep.
those bags, but then they just lay them down like a magic fairy is gonna come and pick them up. So I just wondered if that was a possibility, so that at least if they can see a trash can coming up, they can carry it for a little while.
Sure.
Okay. I think that's all.
Okay,
Okay.
if you have more, you know.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks, Chris.
I just have
We're on
a
board.
clarifying question.
Yeah,
if I may.
absolutely. Yep, you bet.
Director Banks, this is what's known as the SMAP?
No,
No.
SMAP is part of.
Part of this.
But this ordinance is not known as SMAP, it's part of SMAP.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Included
Part is-
in the meat and potatoes of this ordinance.
Outstanding, thank you very much.
This is just a snip.
Snippet.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to add a glossary of terms or, you know.
Next year.
Why not?
We get to read it again then.
Oh, we're required to do this annually.
Okay,
We're required.
okay, good read.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Yeah,
Thank you.
okay. All right, any other questions, comments, concerns? All right. Roll call vote.
Smith,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Burbank,
Yes.
Bergerson,
Yes.
Bender,
Yes.
Green,
Yes.
motion carries. Next item on the agenda is an authorization to renew the employment agreement between the city of Buckley and Assistant Police Chief Mike Northam.
Move to approve the employment agreement between the city of Buckley and Assistant Chief Mike Northam for that position.
Second.
Okay, discussion? Questions, comments, concerns, any of the
So
above?
we have police chief here if anybody has questions.
Okay, anybody? No, everybody's read it, and knows what it is, so perfect. Okay. All right, this is not a roll call vote, so all in favor,
Aye.
all opposed.
Motion carries.
Thank you, council. Staff reports. And we won't have one from the city administrator
You
this
will
evening
not.
unless there's a sign language person
We
handy.
have the development projects, which Chris can just say why
Oh,
that's
perfect.
in there.
Yeah,
So I believe at the last study session, we responded with a table with all the active developments. Member Green requested a map that correlated to that table, so that's what this is, it's that map. With some addition projects, we added some projects that were included in the first. So that's what.
It's very helpful. Thank you.
perfect. Okay. And we have one for EMS levy lid lift, and Sandy's here for questions and comments.
Council. Yes, hopefully we're gonna have a chance to read through the memo on the EMS levy lid lift. I know we've talked about this at many meetings, and so the time frame for us to pass a resolution for council, if they choose to put that on the ballot, is coming up. We'll probably be bringing the draft resolution back to you either next week at the April study session or.
Just a little closer. It's not picking it up. Thank you. Yeah, it should be.
Not that. Either next week at the study session or the first meeting in April, we'll be bringing you the draft resolution. And I believe we do need to have them approved by the end of April, to be able to file with the county. To get onto the primary ballot. So As we kind of listed out in the memo, some of the decision points for council, we kind of covered, and got some head nods from council in the past, which was levy limits can either be, temporary or permanent. We already have a permanent EMS levy, so we pretty much stick with that permanent, portion by doing a levy lift. So that was pretty much decided by the fact that we already have a permanent EMS levy. But it also can be single year or multi-year. And council had shown consensus that a multi-year lift was favored. A single year lift would reset the levy to the 50 cents per 1,000 AV that is allowed. And then that would kind of reset the base, but then it would only be able to grow from there at the 1% annual limit. A multi-year lift would reset it the first year to the 50 cents. And then grow for however many years up to an additional 5 that council would choose at some percent factor. You can't set the rate in year 2 through 5. You can just set a limit factor that it can increase by. In doing research, we've looked at several different fire districts and EMS district levies and stuff that have been passed in the last year or so, and just to see what kind of was typical out there. A lot of them are typical. They're kind of in year 2 through 5 set them to CPI as an inflation measure, or it could be set to the percent. Or we saw some combination of where there was one that said, the greater of 3% or CPI, so that you basically have a floor, 3% of CPI fell below that. There was other ones that just said up to 6%, and then council would agree, set it up the actual percentage in the years, each year following that 6% would be the ceiling then. Or you could just set it straight to CPI and whatever CPI comes out to be, without any floor or ceiling. So assuming that you feel that CPI, the Seattle Tacoma value is the best measure of inflation, and you're setting it to that, so that if it was 2%, that's what it would increase. If it was 6%, that would be what it would increase, or whatever CPI might be. You can even set each year differently too. A lot of districts don't, because you only have 75 words in the main ballot title to really get your point across of what the levy limit is about. And so you have to be very careful with how many words you're using, and if you're trying to say, 50 cents the first year and 3% the second year, it's like you're gonna run out of words to be able to do that as well. So logistically, that might not be a good thing. So that was kind of why we wanted to bring this forward for this council discussion on to be able to draft that resolution for you, because in the resolution, the language that would also be included in the ballot title is needed. So we wanted to get some feedback from council about if you would wish to go all the way out for the full 6 years, which is the maximum on the multi-year lift, and then kind of what your wishes are for future years to see that.
Okay, Councilmember Smith.
As we all know, we have authorized by necessity 2 additional full-time firefighters recently. And that comes at a budgetary cost to the city. Currently, we're only operating, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're operating at half of what our authorized full EMS levy is.
Pretty much our rate right now, I believe, is about 29 cents, 27 and 29 cents. So it's about half of what the legal limit is.
So given that, and obviously this will affect taxpayers that live within here, but they also expect EMS service. And we've heard from fire chief, the assistant fire chief, about call volume. We get updated with, monthly reports, and we can all look at Pulse Point and see what's going on and all this. This is going to come at a cost to, when we do our budgets. So I think this is the right time to take the full EMS levy that we can take, so that when we go into the budget, the biennial budget coming up, that can be reflected, and so we can budget properly for the rest of the city. That's just where I see it.
Okay. Thank you. Denise.
So I just have a question. So if we do the 50 cents, they'll bring it up to 50 cents. Then if we go the multiple years, let's say we decide on a 1% per year, is that 1% of 50 cents? Or is that, then it would be 6% and then 7%, 8%?
So the percent then is how much, so kind of, think of it as like our regular levy. In previous years, you have, so with the regular levy, the limit that you can do on your property tax limit right now is 1%. And the council in Washington, the council sets the levy amount. So we need $1 million. I'm just gonna pick a number. $1 million, you're allowed to raise that dollar amount 1% per year after that. So that's the limit that you're allowed without going to the voters like this. So the EMS levy is allowed a max of 50 cents on a rate. We can reset to that 50 cents, it's only at about 29 cents. That increases the amount of revenue we're gonna get. And then in years 2 through 6, what the limit factor in the resolution and the ballot would be that percent would be increasing the dollar amount.
Okay,
So the rate is really a math problem. It just comes out of the amount of levy with the EV. But you can only set the rate for that first year to get to your legal limit. And then you're talking, the other years are what percent do you want to raise the total revenue? So if you're resetting it to 50 cents and that gets you $1 million, do you want to raise that $1 million by 1%, 2%, 3%, right? So 1% is a given already. You can do that. So you would want to probably in your resolution and ballot do something more than that because you don't need the lift to be able to do 1%. You're trying to get above that's what the lift is for, is you're trying to lift above 1%.
okay.
So 3% would mean you're raising the amount of revenue, the $1
By
million
3%.
by 3%, right?
Okay.
So, and then whatever that rate will work out to be is what it works out to be. But the percent factor, limit factor, as they call it, is for the dollar amount.
The dollar amount, the total dollar amount.
Total
Okay,
dollars to, yeah.
okay, thank you.
A couple
Councilmember Green?
questions for you. So the first one is, looks like the staff recommendation is the 6-year levy, lift, definitely.
Yeah.
That's the max. And then the use of the CPIU. So the question there would be, why does the staff recommend CPIU over like some sort of flat percentage? And then the second question I have is, in all your research that you're doing, looking at the different ballot initiatives, did you see any ballot proposal that was more likely to fail in all the data that you looked at?
The ones that we looked at, I think there was 1, 2, 3, 4. There's at least 6 we found last year. Anywhere from Gig Harbor to Central Pierce, Western Hollow, they all passed. And so, and some of those were for fire and EMS, which is about 50 total versus just the 50 cents for EMS. So in our history here in Buckley, our EMS levies had always passed up to the point where we made it permanent and didn't have to keep going out every 6 years. And then for what we've seen, most surrounding jurisdictions for fire and EMS have all passed on levy. The reason we suggested a CPI versus just a flat percentage was to kind of make sure we weren't over or under collecting against both inflation. So there was, data looking at CPI over the last couple of years where there was points where it was, 8%, and it all depends. CPI has so many different measures. You can do an every other month point to point, January and February, March, April, and July, they do every other month. You can do a 6-month average, there's an annual average, so they have different types of CPI, but there was points where on the point to point, it was up in the 8-9% about a year ago. It's been falling back down, it's in more that 4 or 5% right now. And so if you set it at a flat percentage and you said 5, if inflation was really, really high or really low, you could over or under collect and feeling that there's that perception that you're charging the public maybe more than what inflation really is, right? Or you're not collecting enough and inflation is really high and then you're short what we really need to be able to cover the cost of inflation. So I think that was, and it seems through all the research that we did, that we didn't find anybody that set it at a 5%.
Okay. So CPI is like that's like the standard.
Yeah, that's the standard. Like I said, there was a few where they kind of did a combo, greater of 3% or CPI, I think to ensure that they weren't falling back down to, just about 1%.
Yeah.
That doesn't really cover the increase in costs. But I mean, I could put it in PPI, I don't know how long. So, more than likely, it would be at least about 3% for the balance.
Super. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Connie?
The question is, why did you use Seattle, Tillman, Bellevue?
Seattle Tacoma Bellevue, is a typical measure in this area because it does look at just Seattle, Tacoma and Bellevue, so it's looking at more the inflation of the local area versus the CPI. If you're using more of a nationwide one, then you're getting such a broader span where we could be experiencing high inflation and maybe the south or the east isn't, or vice versa. And so it's not necessarily maybe a true representative of inflation outside of our region.
No, I was just wondering why you're using the bigger cities here rather than any of the smaller ones, which,
There isn't a CPI.
There isn't any for-
That's
okay.
That's the regional.
that's what I thought, but I wasn't sure.
Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
thank you.
So that is the regional Seattle Bellevue. Used to be Seattle Tacoma Bremerton.
Bremerton.
And they changed it to
Mhm.
Seattle Tacoma Bellevue.
Which is a better reflection of what's actually going on in the greater Puget Sound
Yeah.
region.
So that's most local.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Does anybody have you were looking for something this evening to kind of get us,
Just that we
Yeah.
could try and draft the resolution, if council has thoughts on that. I know it's kind of hard to, we're bringing the forecast back on April 16th. But we also don't want to wait to bring the resolution to you until after that timing wise to be able to file with the county and everything. So, I think setting the measure to something like an inflation measure like CPI, then kind of allows us to have that flexibility to measure it up or down, without tying it to a specific percentage and then finding out later that that's too high. So.
Brandon?
Right now, I kind of like the idea of having like the CPI, but also that floor that you don't go under.
Like a 3%.
Some percent, yeah, I don't know the exact number, but in case inflation ever does, relax a little bit, we're still able to bring in some revenue to.
And
towards
the
our
other
new
cost, the
personnel.
other items, sorry to point out too, is even if CPI was high at 8% or something, if that amount on our levy, if increasing at 8% would set us above a 50-cent rate, the county will cap it at the 50 cents. So it may be 8%, but really maybe we'll only get a 6% increase because that's already moving us back to our 50 cents per thousand. And we can't collect more revenue than what the 50 cents per thousand will allow us to do legally. So there is some kind of fail-safe ceiling built into that if the CPI is really high, we'll probably get capped lower than that because of the 50 cents.
Okay. Ron?
I just don't know why we just can't take it all the way to the 50%. Or 50 cents now.
We can't set the rate past the first year. So you kind of have to guess what you think CPI and AV are gonna do to try and increase the levy amount enough to keep close to your 50 cents when you do the math. So, I know. Washington.
Yeah. Okay.
Washington, I need to make a pie chart, because, so in Washington, even with your regular levy every year, we never set the rate, right? We said we had 2 million in our levy, we can increase it to 1%, so next year we get the 2 million plus 1%, and there's your levy amount. Then they take the levy amount, they divide it by our city AV, and that's what your property tax rate is. It just works out the math. So depending on how the AV does up or down, your rate might go up or down, even if your dollars are going up and down. So a lot to say is we can't set anything besides the first year at 50 cents. And then we have to do our best educated guess at looking at historical trends of AV increasing to be able to say, well, we need to increase the levy amount 5% a year to keep up with AV, to keep close to that 50 cents. They don't allow.
They don't want a dollar that by whack, they won't let you use a dollar figure. It has to be a percentage.
It has to be a percent for years to.
So that's good information about the ceiling being in there. They're not gonna let it go over the 50 cents. So
Right.
if you want to set a floor of 2.5% or 3%, and that keeps you, we know we're playing catch up already. So we want to put a floor in there. That's completely up to you, you know.
Floor in there would help not let you drop down too far.
So if we set the floor 2.5% and or CPI if it was greater.
Correct.
Yeah, sure. Great. So CPI is 5, it's 5, it's just that protects you with the floor, if CPI went down to 1.5. Yeah,
Okay.
to try and help stay close to the 50 cents.
Okay. Anybody have any inklings on a percentage, Amanda?
I'm fine with the 6-year. I mean, I'm just thinking, do we really think that CPI is gonna, I mean, within 6 years that it's gonna drop to, I don't know. I'm fine with whatever, honestly, but I think 6 years would be better, so.
And we have the option to just go straight CPI without a floor or a ceiling.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I guess this is the $1 million question for this evening. Where would you like to, where would council, anybody want to throw out a number or negotiate kind of? This isn't a vote per se. We're just trying to get some language so Sandy can draft the get kind of rough draft us what we're going to be looking at for the ballot language.
Council more comfortable, I guess, more with a CPI measure or something versus just a flat percent, those kind of.
CPI.
Ron,
I'm with Councilmember Burbank, 6 years straight CPI.
I mean, I don't know.
I'll throw my vote again for CPI, but with a floor.
okay, what
like
would you
that
like the
better.
floor to be?
So that's the $1
That's,
million question.
yep, that's where,
Is there a reason you started with 3%? I mean,
That was
your
the
your
example we
finance
found.
brain.
That was the example we found.
Okay. I don't have a number right now, but I mean, is there like any kind of like data or some figures you could provide to kind of show a guesstimate? I mean, I know it's tough because you're, you have a
Well, I could see, yeah,
magic ball or anything, but
I could run some numbers for council to bring back too, to say, okay, if looking at the trends in AV, where those might go, and if we did a 3%, you know, or 5 or 6, where, what's that gonna get you as far as dollars and what that's gonna do to the rate?
okay, and
You know, and the examples I put into the memo was kind of an attempt at that, where you can see, on page, I guess it's page 72 of the packet, that if we chose CPI, the CPI had an increase of 5% every year and your AV increased 5% every year conveniently, right? Then you should remain at that 50 cents like you were talking about. But like if CPI increased 5% and the AV increased 10%, so the AV is increasing more, you start at your 50 cents in the first year, and by year 6, you're down to 39 cents. So, and then at 6 years, you may have to go back and do another lift, to bump your back up to the 50 cents.
Yeah.
Courtney had a comment.
Okay.
She just wanted to say that most cities that they looked at had 6% as a flat percentage or 3% with CPI.
okay. Okay, and so we do we have enough time, Sandy, to discuss this at the study session next
It's-
week?
It is on next
It's on
week's
the-
agenda.
Okay.
We'll have the draft resolution and we can.
Okay,
Like I said, bring some numbers to show you and have, you know, then it's just a matter of changing that percentage in the resolution when we bring it for.
okay, good. Well, everybody's got it on their mind for the next week then, so perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
All right. And public comment. We've got 3 minutes apiece for anybody who would like to speak. Anybody? Going once, so on and so forth. All right. Yes, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, council.